It's time for an inside look at what's cooking on the San Diego Padres hot stove as the team gets ready for the 2025 season.
Swing and a miss. Padres win.
Sam Levitt breaks down the Padres offseason moves and provides an in-depth look at everything you need to know before the Padres take the field for spring training.
Swinging a high fly ball. Deep left center. This one way back and gone.
Plus the latest headlines from around Major League Baseball and analysis of what's happening around the big leagues.
Breaking news out of baseball.
Welcome to Inside San Diego Baseball with the Padres Radio Network's pre- and post-game host, Sam Levitt.
And we're coming to you live from inside our San Diego studios. Welcome into the first ever live radio edition of Inside San Diego Baseball. Sam Levitt with you here on this Wednesday night, taking you up until 9 p.m. Yes, they have awoken me from my off-season slumber. Adam Klug has convinced me to come in the studio, talk a little Padres every week, 7 to 9 p.m., where we will be able to take an extensive look into the Padres offseason, their moves, rumors, headlines, interviews, you name it, we will talk about it. I'm going to tell you right now, not a ton of new news to talk about with the GM meetings going on in San Antonio right now. But hey, tonight, as good a night as ever to kick off the first edition of our 7 to 9 p.m. program here on Wednesday nights here on 97.3 The Fan. And I also think a good way for us to catch up, if you will, over the course of the off season. Maybe the last couple of years, aside from filling in, you hear me at the winter meetings. Maybe one could argue I went a little MIA during the off season. So they've got me in here. We'll take your calls throughout the program, like we do during our post game shows throughout the year. Little flavor of the post game show. Our pre and post game coverage, really. So you can call in 833-288-0973. Again, 833-288-0973. The phone number to call if you want to get involved on the show here tonight. Talk about anything Padres related. We can certainly talk about the end of the 2024 season. I have not, aside from one morning filling in on Ben and Woods and a couple of appearances on the daily shows, I have not really revisited the end of the season beyond what I said on the post-game show that night in L.A. at Dodger Stadium. So we can talk about the end of the year. We can talk about the World Series. I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. Some final World Series thoughts for you and wrap it back into the Padres. And just have a little fun here. And again, take your phone calls at 833-288-0973. Now, joining me, you heard him on the Scraby Show, and our great Frank Marchese will chime in from time to time here. Now, this is great here because Frank, he's kind of like the silent captain, if you will, the silent key of our post-game, pre-game, in-game coverage during the Padres season. But Frank's going to chime in here on Wednesday nights. Frank, how are you? You look great.
Doing good. Thank you very much. And I'm excited to be on this journey with you, even though it's only until, March, February?
February, March. We have not figured out if this will be a spring training fixture on Wednesday nights. That's it's in discussions. So I think we're going to revisit that as we get a little bit closer to spring training. But you look great. I know you talked to Scraby about your weight loss journey. I noticed it right away. First time I've seen you since the surgery. So you look great. Good to know the clothes are...
First time you've seen me since the regular season ended because you were on the road the whole postseason.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a short trip to LA a few times, unfortunately. But you look great, and I'm happy to hear it's going really, really well. And I will tell you, I'm looking forward to seeing you week by week because this is already 50 pounds in a month. That is nothing to sneeze at. So you look great. I'm glad to see and hear it's going well. So all that good stuff, and we'll talk about a little bit of everything here tonight. Again, we'll take your phone calls. We already got a couple coming in, 833-288-0973. Just to give you a little preview of what we'll touch on here, and we'll bounce around a little bit. We'll hear from Mike Shildt, AJ Preller. If you missed it earlier today, Padres officially announcing a contract extension with Mike Shildt that will take him through the 2027 season, which is obviously, I think, really, really good news. And we'll revisit what AJ and Mike Shildt had to say earlier today. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll take a wide look at the free agent class, sort of get you set on that, give you a little taste of, who the Padres might go after. Let's be honest about it. It's really hard to gauge it right now for a couple of reasons. One being you just don't know what the budget is, and I think that's a really important part of it. We'll recap some of the stuff that did go down in the last week. Again, nothing groundbreaking, but not offering qualifying offers to guy like Profar, Kim, some of the free agents the Padres will have from their team in 2024. We'll go through some of the major league headlines from earlier today, this week. Also, we'll do a few player in reviews, and we're going to do that throughout these shows on Wednesday nights. Sort of take a look at the individual seasons of a few players each show and just sort of talk about it, what those guys did well, what you want to see moving forward. We'll talk about Kyle Higashioka today. I think he's a good one to talk about right off the bat. Dylan Cease, Adrian Morejon, those are the guys I got lined up earlier today. So we'll get to all that a little bit later in the show. But I did want to just touch on this here in the opening segment, because the article came out from Kevin Acee in the 5 p.m. hour, and I'm not totally sure if Gwynn and Chris and Scraby, if they got to this during the course of the last couple of hours, because it came out on the 5 p.m. hour. I know they replayed their interview a little bit earlier as well with Russ Dorsey. That was a really good job by them. Great job by Russ, talking all things Major League Baseball from the GM meetings in San Antonio. But I do want to read this here from Kevin Acee earlier today. Kevin, who I believe is in San Antonio. Yeah, he is. The byline here says San Antonio. And, of course, we talked about the Mike Shildt contract extension, 2-year contract extension that'll take him through 2027. But also, as part of this article from Kevin Acee, and you'll hear AJ Preller and Mike Shildt on this a little bit later, one of the things they talked about was the coaching staff and where they were as far as determining if the entire coaching staff was coming back, if Ruben Niebla, whose contract did expire at the end of the season, if he was coming back. And I want to read this from Kevin. Kevin writing, the Padres have offered contracts to all their coaches whose deals were expiring and expect to have the same staff in 2025. Kevin continues writing, pitching coach Ruben Niebla, who has overseen one of MLB's most consistent staffs the past 3 seasons, will take part in meetings regarding the pitching group the next 2 days, even though his new contract has not yet been agreed to. Hitting coach Victor Rodriguez, who is under contract through 2025, is expected to have at least 1 more year added to his deal. So a couple of things there that I think are important from what Kevin Acee writes earlier tonight in the Union Tribune. Number one, how about Ruben Niebla taking part in meetings over the next 2 days, even though he hasn't technically agreed to the contract extension? Now, you'll hear this coming up a little bit later. I thought it was pretty obvious based on what AJ Preller said earlier today that Ruben Niebla is going to be back. The answer sort of sounded that way without saying it. But that reporting from Kevin, I think, is really good and gives you an indication that Ruben Niebla is going to be back. I mean, if he was planning on going anywhere else, I don't know that he would be a part of the meetings. And again, Kevin writing the new contract has not yet been agreed to, but it certainly seems, and again, you'll hear this from AJ, that Ruben wants to be here, the Padres want him here, and why wouldn't they? He's done a terrific job with this pitching staff now for a few years. And Victor Rodriguez also adding 1 more year to his deal. And look, both those guys, they are well deserving of the extensions, as is Mike Shildt. I mean, Ruben Niebla has been in a lot of ways a pitching whisperer with a lot of guys. We've seen vast improvement with a lot of guys that have come to the Padres. That's number one. And number two, with Victor Rodriguez, look, despite the 24 scoreless innings to end the year, this offense was great. I mean, you loved what they did offensively and the strides they took, the different approach they had compared to 2023 and 2024, the moving of the line, the putting the ball in play, the contact-oriented approach, the lack of strikeouts, everything about what they did offensively this season was great. I mean, again, don't let the 24 scoreless innings spoil the rest for you. This was a great offense. And I tie it back into this, and I think this is going to be one of the real themes for the Padres, potentially this offseason, but also I just think in general, moving into 2025, and maybe puts them, despite having a lot of similar faces the last few years, I think puts them in a little bit of a different spot than where they've been in years past. And I think it comes down to one word, which I think should excite you for 2025 and beyond. And I also think is really important for any organization, and right now the Padres in particular. And that word is consistency. I see somebody in the YouTube chat says continuity is key to success. You can use really either continuity or consistency. And the reason I think today's news, Mike Schultz getting the extension, Ruben Niebla, again, being part of the meetings the next 2 days, despite not technically agreeing to a contract yet, although the tea leaves kind of read that that's going to happen based on what A.J. Preller said today and based on now what Kevin wrote. And obviously Victor Rodriguez getting an extension as well. It's a level of consistency that I think this organization has really needed. You take it back to when A.J. Preller was here. Obviously, Andy Green was here for a number of years. Really a very, very different time for the organization and a very different type of team and different expectations. You talk about then transitioning into the Jace Tingler era where, hey, he was 2 years and done despite the 1 year in 2020 and half a year in 2021. Being really, really good. Well, didn't last long. And then you had Bob Melvin, who obviously had a really nice 2022, and it went a lot differently in 2023. And by the time New Year's rolled around, the Padres had a new manager heading into last year. So consistency as far as manager, as far as coaching, look, it has not been there a ton for this organization. So having that coaching-wise, I think is great. But I also think this team has consistency in two other important areas moving forward, and especially into 2025. Number one, in players, and number two, in philosophy. And the philosophy part ties back into the coaching staff. But you think about this roster, and we're going to have plenty of time here tonight and in the weeks ahead to talk about rumors, to talk about fits, to talk about contracts. But make no mistake, the Padres are in a really good spot at the start of this offseason. Now, big question is how much can they spend? Big question is, are they going to go back over that first level of the luxury tax? These are all very important questions. But when you look at this team, they have consistency in the quality of what they have coming back, whether that's starting pitching. And again, having no Joe Musgrove is significant, but having Darvish, Cease, and King, 1, 2, 3, it's a pretty good place to start. Again, it's not complete, but it's a pretty good place to start. Really better than pretty good. As far as the top three, it's a really, really good place to start. As far as bullpen, look, I look at this roster right now. The one area where I don't know that they need to do a ton is in their bullpen. Even without Tanner Scott, this is a very, very, I think, well-positioned bullpen right here, right now. Not that you're not going to add, not that you're not going to sign anybody, not that you're not going to make a trade, but they're really well-positioned. And obviously, lineup-wise as well, yes, they have to figure out what they're going to do in left field, whether that's Profar or somebody else. Yes, they have to figure out what they're going to do behind the plate in a starting sense, whether that's Higgy or somebody else. Yes, at shortstop, that's a big question of how they approach shortstop. Is that Xander? Is that somebody else? Do they move Xander back to second? Is Jake Cronenworth back to first base on most days? Yes, these are all very important questions. But the point is, with guys like Manny entrenched at third, Xander, Jake, Luis Ariz, Fernando Tatis Jr., Jackson Merrill. There's a level of consistency there with this roster from year to year, which I think is really good based on what they did in the second half. And also in philosophy, having that coaching staff carry over, hopefully having the offensive philosophy that we saw all year, aside from the last couple of nights of the season. But the point is, I think you have to hope that the consistency, the continuity, whatever word you want to use, is something this team can really benefit from. To me, you want this team to pick up right where they left off in 2024. Obviously not the way it ended, but in the way they played in the second half. I mean, that was as good a baseball as this team has played in years. I mean, for that amount of time, I know the start of 2021, I wasn't here for it, was great. But you want this team, from a regular season perspective, you want them to pick up right where they left off. And to me, the consistency, the continuity of Mike Schilt, of the coaching staff, of a lot of this roster, even though we don't know what the whole picture looks like yet, to me, that's really promising. And it's something this organization has not really had a lot of. So it's a very good thing in my eyes. And I think they're in a really good spot to start. And that's sort of how we begin the offseason talk. Frank, anything you want to add before we go to break here?
There are a lot of question marks, I think, especially around the starting rotation. It's one thing to have like guys like Matt Waldron and Randy Vasquez come in and have spot starts when you know you're getting somebody back, and that somebody especially is Joe Musgrove. Now you're not getting him back. You know he's out. And then by the time he comes back, there's a very good chance that you're going to have to replace Dylan Cease. So he's going to replace Dylan Cease. So you need more starting pitching even there. I think as far as free agency goes, and we'll get to that a little bit later, as you mentioned, I think starting pitching, probably a first baseman, not because Jake Cronenworth isn't good. I lost that fight a long time ago. But to have Bogarts back at his natural position, Cronenworth back at second, and have a power-hitting, preferably left-handed first baseman, I think those are the two priorities that this team should have going into this offseason.
Yeah, and it's fair. And look, the starting pitching part of it is really important and going to be interesting because the internal options are interesting and I think a little unknown. Now, would it shock me if Matt Waldron is in the starting rotation at the start of next year? No. And quite frankly, I think he may have earned that right if that spot's available because of, for the most part, how solid he was. Okay, and he ran into a wall at the end of the year, but I'm willing to give Matt Waldron another spin from an opening day roster standpoint. And if that's your number 5 spot, fine. I think where it becomes a little dicey is, hey, if it's Matt Waldron and Randy Vasquez in your 4 or 5, and that's the answer, yeah, after
that that's the problem.
Right. And by the way, you need way more starting pitching than that in general in a baseball season. And Frank, you make a good point. And look, that's going to play a role in potentially how the Padres treat the rotation this offseason. The fact that, hey, Dylan Cease and Michael King are both free agents at the end of next year, unless they get extended. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But right here, right now, they're free agents at the end of the year. So you make a really good point. And AJ Preller, that is, has always done a really good job at looking to the future, right? Even in the deals he's made the last couple of years. Notice something about them? They all have multiple years left, whether it was King, whether it was Cease, whether it was Ariz, whether it was Jason Adam. List goes on and on and on. That's been sort of a hallmark of a lot of the trades he's made and may work out that way starting pitching-wise because of who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. All right, let's step aside. When we come back, we'll, you know what, we'll talk a little World Series. We'll sort of wrap up the World Series, maybe talk about what we learned about the Padres and how they were set up based on the postseason and the World Series and how things ultimately went to the final pitch of 2024 in Major League Baseball. We'll talk about that. We've got plenty of Padres stuff to discuss. We'll hear from Mike Schilt, AJ Preller, coming up a little bit later as well. You're listening to the first edition of Inside San Diego Baseball, our new offseason show, Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 p.m. You can also get a call in, 833-288-0973. Phone number to call. We're back in a moment on 97.3 The Fan. Our first edition of Inside San Diego Baseball continues here on 97.3 The Fan, 7:23 on this Wednesday night. Sam Levitt with you. Frank Marchese on the board along for the ride on this beautiful Wednesday night. With fall back on Sunday, the clock's going back. It's pitch dark out, and we're getting used to that this time of year. I was saying to the guys in here during Gwynn and Chris, I was like, man, it's like 5:15 p.m. It is so dark out. It's unbelievable how different it feels. But it's that time of year. It means we're it's getting towards the heart of the baseball offseason. So that's okay. We'll continue on here. Talk Padres. Take your phone calls, 833-288-0973. We'll hear from Mike Schultz, AJ Preller, what they had to say earlier today, announcing the contract extension for Mike Schultz earlier today. Coming up in just a little bit, so stay tuned for that. But Frank, before we get to that, you mentioned something during the break, and I think it's a really good point, and may lead us into an article you shared with me here earlier today. But that's the idea of catcher, the position, as the Padres mull over what they want to do with Kyle Higashioka, any of the other free agent catchers. The idea that the Padres would be looking for more of a stopgap for 2025 at catcher, maybe 2026 too, because of the looming Ethan Salas in the minor league system.
Yeah, Ethan Salas is coming up. So, I mean, I saw get Higgy back. I think if you get Higgy back and Campusano, you're not looking for a killer catcher position. You're just looking for a catcher that's not going to kill you right now. Salas is coming. It's only going to be a year, maybe two, so it doesn't make sense to go after some of the big catchers that are on the market right now, knowing that this kid is coming up. You just need one, maybe two catchers, possibly three, that are going to be serviceable just to get the job done. And then when Salas comes up, veteran catcher, maybe keep Campusano around, ease Salas in easily, and then maybe halfway through his first season, then let him go. And the catcher position takes care of itself from there.
Well, I do think in Higgy's case in particular, I do think he fits the bill of some, even though Higgy, I think, has proved himself to be more than a quote-unquote stopgap. That's probably disrespectful to Higgy at this point.
I would agree, yes.
But I do think if you had the opportunity to bring Kyle Higashioka back on, let's say, a 2-year deal, on a fair price. Oh my goodness. I mean, look, that's probably what he's going to get is a 2-year deal, a 3-year deal. I don't think Higgy's getting a 4 or 5-year deal, but if you could bring him back on a 2-year deal and be that bridge to Ethan Salas, and let's say Salas is up at some point. I'm not going to say next year because he's 18 right now, but I think 2026, realistic, very realistic. He could be up even at 20 years old, something like that. You know, it doesn't mean that Higgy can't be here. I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves because it's probably still beyond next season in 2026 is his arrival. But who knows with the way the Padres work? We could make the opening day roster for all I know. For all I know, they're planning right now. Somebody in the front office is listening right now saying, Higgy, they think Salas isn't going to be on this opening day roster. Who knows? You never know.
I wouldn't test Salas the way you've tested Merrill. No, I would not do that to him.
But I think Higgy fits that bill is the point. Look, the Luis Campusano situation is interesting. I'd be fine with Higgy and Campy being the two catchers on this roster. I think Higgy's got to lead the way as far as that tandem. Much like it ended up being throughout the year. Now, look, Luis is still pretty young, and maybe he's going to end up improving. Look, from both an offensive and defensive standpoint, I don't know that you can, if it's not going to be Higgy, I don't think you can count on Luis Campusano being your number one catcher.
I would want, especially with Salas coming up, I would want a veteran catcher here.
No, I'm with you.
And Higgy fits that bill. And as you just mentioned, the age of Campy, I love Campusano. I've been rooting for him to be the starter of this team for years. But if you're going to clear the way for Salas, I would rather trade Campy next year and have Higgy bring him up and teach him what it means to be a major league catcher.
Yeah, no, I think Higgy on a 2-year deal would make a ton of sense. And I also think he's a great clubhouse guy.
Yes.
I was a big fan of Higgy. I thought he brought a lot. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Higgy coming back, and I think it's hard, and we'll talk more about Higgy during these player reviews. I think it's hard to find a catcher in 2024 from an offensive standpoint who actually brings what he brings, which is a lot of power. If Higgy played 100-plus games, I think he's hitting 20-25 home runs.
Most home runs he's ever hit in his career this year.
Yeah, and I'm not super worried about the average. So, look, I'm a big proponent of bringing Higgy back. I think where they run into a little bit of trouble and where it gets a little dicier is if there are teams out there that are going to offer Higgy, let's say, 3 years, Padres are going to have to make that decision. By the way, doesn't mean
I wouldn't mind
Me
giving
neither.
him 3 years.
Look, I think
have him back up Salas for a year.
I'm with you. And
Great.
I think the reality with Ethan Salas, when he comes up, he's going to be very young regardless. If that's 19, if that's 20, heck, even if he didn't come up till he was 21 years old, okay? It's a very, very young player.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for a catcher, you will need a more veteran presence at that position. So we're getting ahead of ourselves. I do want to bring up, just while we're talking about Ethan Salas, this article, and I'll admit I don't know the gentleman who wrote it, Kerry Miller, Bleacher Report, but it was interesting, and it's worth just mentioning here because this is going to be
before you guys freak
Yes.
out. It's a hypothetical.
hypothetical.
It's a hypothetical. It's not existing. Just hear us out.
The article focuses on Garrett Crochet, who ultimately didn't get traded last year from the White Sox, and begs the question of what could be potential trade packages for Garrett Crochet, who I would imagine has a pretty good chance of getting traded this offseason. And look, just from a Padres standpoint, still, even though the Padres have emptied out the minor league system, and I don't know that they've got what to trade for 2 years of Crochet anymore, what he's going to command as far as prospect capital. But with that said, look, he fits the mold of an A.J. Preller guy, just like we thought he did during the summer in two senses. Number one, he's really talented and he's got great stuff. And number two, he's got multiple years of control left. And both those things are typically things that A.J. Preller likes. He likes the big fish, the very talented fish, and he likes guys with multiple years of control. The hypothetical trade from Kerry Miller, this was Bleacher Report. One of the trades for Garrett Crochet. Padres send Ethan Salas, Cash Mayfield, who was their first-round pick this past year, Kavaris Tears, who was another high-round pick this past year, for Garrett Crochet. So, look, somebody like Crochet makes a lot of sense. I don't see the Padres trading Salas. I don't see them trading that package. Look, here's the reality. The Padres traded a lot away in the last 12 months. The Arise trade, the Cease trade, the Scott trade, the Adam trade. We could go through the entire prospect list. We're not going to do it here tonight. But I don't know that they have the prospect capital unless you're going to get crazy and trade a Salas or a DeVries, which I don't expect them to do, to get a guy like a Garrett Crochet. I think the Garrett Crochet window has passed, and quite frankly, for 2025, if we're just talking about this year, I don't think you need to even really wade in that pool. To me, the Padres starting pitching-wise, could they go get a star? Sure. But they need just solid, veteran guys who can put up quality innings and eat some innings. Not that that's all you want your quote-unquote 4 and 5 starters to be, but that's where I expect them to live, in the middle tier of the starting pitching market. And I think that will be probably enough for this team if everybody stays healthy.
I hope that if there's one thing that A.J. Preller took away from this year, is the value of having a homegrown star on this team. You guys gravitated to Jackson Merrill instantly and built him up as an immediate fan favorite and made him a national superstar. in his rookie year. If you that's something that this team has been lacking for so many years now, is that homegrown star that you guys can latch onto. To trade DeVries, to trade Salas, I think is not going to happen. I agree with you. They should be absolutely 110% off limits. You are not touching these two guys. And I hope that the reaction you guys had to Jackson Merrill is part of the reason why. You guys instantly gravitated towards him. And I think you guys will do the same thing with DeVries and Salas when they come up.
Yeah, look, I think the other thing is too, and we'll have nights where we talk more about the minor league system and maybe even check in with some of the minor league broadcasters around the system, maybe even coaches, things like that, managers from around the Padres minor league system. I think this is a time in an off season where the Padres will reload a bit or allow their system in 2025 to they've already drafted their guys. So when I say reload, it's not add an infusion of guys until the next international signing class and next year's draft, but to allow their system to get beefed up rankings-wise, like it has time after A.J. Preller. Think about it this way. They've got Salas and DeVries, the top two guys in their system, right? After that, here are the ages for everybody else as we go down the list. I'm not even going to give you the names. I'm going down the MLB top prospects list, KMLB.com, MLB Pipeline. 19 years old, 19 years old, 17 years old, 22 years old, 22 years old, 21 years old, 20 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old. That brings us to Bradley Rodriguez, number 11 on this list. So it is full of really young guys. Look, when the Padres made all those deals, the Arise trade, the Cease trade, the Adam trade, the Scott trade, we knew what they were giving up, and that was giving up a lot of their more immediate depth. Mm-hmm. Not that it was necessarily superstar-laden, solid players, not necessarily star-laden, but they were giving up guys who seemed a lot closer. They were giving up the Robbie Snellings, who probably would be in the mix for a rotation spot this year, or even an Adam Major, who I know struggled, but it was probably a little bit early for Adam Major in the major leagues.
Ryan Leathers the year before.
Sure, and there are other names you could add on this list too. That's what they were giving up. So I don't expect that this is going to be necessarily a heavy trade off season for the Padres. I don't expect it. A lot of young guys in this system. The Padres and A.J. Preller, they did that. Think about the trades they made just since last March. Cease, Arise, Adam, Scott. I mean, really significant trades and prospect capital that they gave up. So look, the system's in a little bit of a different spot than where it's been. And I think A.J. Preller has proved he can rebuild it and rebuild the reputation really, really quickly. But I think it's going to be more of a free agent type off season for this team. Let's hold that thought, because we'll return and we'll take this conversation one step forward, because I think it brings up one of the real early important philosophical questions for the Padres at the very start of this offseason, and a question that I think deeply affects the rest of their offseason. We'll talk about that when we come back. We'll also start taking your phone calls, 833-288-0973. Again, 833-288-0973. You're listening to Inside San Diego Baseball, our first edition in this Padres offseason, taking you up until 9 p.m. here on 97.3 The Fan. Inside San Diego Baseball, our new Wednesday night program continues here on 97.3 The Fan. Sam Levitt with you inside our San Diego studios as we come to you live from inside our Odyssey studios. Sam Levitt with you, Frank Marchese chiming in as well as we talk all things Padres offseason, MLB news. Not a ton of news and rumors to really digest yet, so we're just sort of spitballing here on this Wednesday night. We will in our next segment in the 8 p.m. hour. We will revisit what A.J. Preller, Mike Schilt had to say earlier today during the press conference. Again, if you missed it, Mike Schilt agreeing to a 2-year extension with the Padres that'll take him through the 2027 season. So that was very good news, and we'll talk more about that when we hear from A.J. and Mike at the very top of the hour. We talked about it a little bit in the opening segment, just the consistency, the value of that, the consistency of having Ruben Niebla in all likelihood back, the consistency of having Victor Rodriguez here and back, and what comes along with that, and sort of the good spot the Padres really are in when it comes to the start of this offseason. I do want to get to a YouTube comment here because I think and we'll get to what we teased at the end of our last segment about another question involving a young player that I think is important for this team. But just to address a YouTube comment here, because I think it's an important thing to bring up. Diesel on YouTube saying, why do people believe we won't spend money after resetting the CBT? Does it make sense to not spend when Preller knows our window is now? Well, number one, you're absolutely right. The window is definitely now, and 2025 is another prime year in that quote-unquote window. But, hey, if AJ does his job, hopefully that window extends beyond 2025. And even as the guys like Manny and Xander and Darvish and Musgrove, all these guys continue to get older. I understand the thinking that the window with these stars is right now, and there's a lot of truth to that. Look, I think it brings up the interesting point, and this is going to be a really interesting and important question for this team, and we alluded to it earlier. Look, the idea of how much are they going to spend, and are they going to be willing to go back over that at least first CBT number? Now, for 2024, the first threshold of the CBT is 200 and, it's 2025 coming up. 2025 is $241 million is that first level of the luxury tax of that CBT, $241 million. And the reason it's an important question, depending on what metric, what website you look at, Fangraphs or Spot Track or even the Union Tribune had their own estimates. The Padres payroll right now with projected arbitration, I've seen anywhere from the low 200s to Fangraphs right now has it at 212. Okay? I don't know where exactly that number lands. Arbitration's a big part of that. But it's somewhere likely in the low 200s right now. So why is that important? Well, if the CBT number is 241, let's live in a world where the Padres did want to stay below. I'm not saying they will, but let's live in that world for a second. Well, I mean, that's 30 to 35 million maybe to spend. It's not a lot. Not a lot when you're looking for at least one or two starting pitchers and a left fielder and potentially a catcher and maybe a first baseman and maybe a shortstop again. Depends on how they play things out here. It's not a ton. So, yes. Would it make a huge difference for the Padres to at least go over that first CBT threshold? Yes, it would. It would make a big difference. Will they or won't they? I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know what the situation is. We know they reset it, so it hopefully should give them more incentive to go back over. But if they don't, it's not a lot of wiggle room to play with. And I said this a few weeks ago on a spot with Gwynn and Chris, and I think it's still true now. Whether they go over or not, or how far they're going to go over, to me, this is a very similar season or off season that A.J. Preller had a year ago, where A.J.'s going to have to hit. It's going to have a good off season. It's going to have to hit on a lot of moves. The names don't need to be the same. Doesn't need to be Profar. Doesn't need to be Solano. Doesn't need to be Peralta. Doesn't need to be a Michael King get and being right on it. Doesn't need to be promoting a Jackson Merrill maybe earlier than anybody thought and it being a really a genius move with the way it panned out. doesn't need to be the same names, doesn't even need to be the same amount of success, but it's got to hit, and it's got to be good one way or another. So to me, Frank, whether they go over or they somehow stay under, and they've got to be really, really prudent with that budget. To me, this is a very similar offseason where AJ's going to have to hit in a lot of ways, and if he does, I think they'll be in a good spot. You know, if you make some moves and they don't hit, that's when you get in trouble.
I mean, of course, you're looking at, as far as free agents go, you're hearing a lot of buzz about Max Fried coming here. Atlanta's already offered him a qualifying offer, so we'll see if he accepts or declines that. Of course, Blake Snell is the big name that everyone wants back. As far as other positions, I'm looking at first base. When does Cronenworth start his big boy contract? Is that this year or is that next year? Sure. You can look for maybe, again, a stopgap until DeFreeze gets here.
Well, yeah.
And I'm seeing Carlos Santana. I know he's about to be 40 years old, but he just won his first Gold Glove.
Yeah, to me, and we'll take a phone call here in a second, but to me, and we could talk about this a little bit more in the 8 p.m. hour, to me, that's one of the key questions of the very start of this offseason. And I think something the Padres would be wise to decide first before they enter free agency. And that is, and it ties into the DeVries conversation, that is Xander Bogaerts going to be your everyday shortstop next year? Or are you going to revert back to putting him at second base and that being a longer-term plan for Xander? Or are you viewing it as Xander ended the year there, he can certainly handle playing another year there, and you've got a guy waiting in the wings in DeVries who you believe is going to be your everyday shortstop of the future anyway, even though he's very, very young. But could Xander be there another year or two? Think he could. Think he plays the position well enough. What I would say is whether he's going to be at short or whether he's going to be at second. And I have no problem if they look at this and say, we want Xander at second. We want Cronenworth at first base most days. We want Arise DHing a lot, maybe not every day, but he could certainly play first, and they can, switch him in and out and get another guy who can play, an infield spot. I think it makes sense based on their personnel to have Bogaerts at short and Cronenworth at second most days and Arise at first, and then get another guy like a Santana, a power-hitting first baseman who can also play first. I think it makes a lot more sense. I don't know how they feel. I don't know how Xander feels. Okay, if the long-term plan is to put him at second, could I see Xander saying to them, "Hey, if we're going to do this, we got to do it, and I don't want to go back to short. I'm no longer a shortstop." I could see that. I would be willing to bet that if he could squeeze out another year or two of short, which I think he can, I think number one, it makes sense for him, and I think it makes sense for the team. I would be surprised right now if Xander Bogaerts wasn't this team's shortstop.
And to that point, you're looking at the shortstops right now. Willie Adames
probably out of there.
Is the number one.
Yeah.
Ha-Sung Kim, a reunion with him. I
don't see that happening.
I wouldn't either.
No. And he's hurt.
Yes. Somebody you and I know very well, Jose Iglesias, is the number 3 shortstop on the list as far as WAR is concerned.
Could certainly be a bench piece.
Paul DeYoung, Kevin Newman, Ahmed Rosario, Nick Ahmed, Brandon Crawford. Those are the only positive WAR shortstops that are available.
And I think that's part of the conversation as well. Like, what are your options outside Xander? Okay, let's assume it's not going to be Adames and it's not going to be Kim. I mean, it's not a big time class. I mean, after Adames and Kim, I'll be respectful to Kim and put him in that category. And he's got a unique situation because of the injury now.
Adames had an 8 WAR. Kim was 6.9. Insert joke. And then it's a fall off to Paul DeYoung, who was 2.6.
Right. To me,
Iglesias, who was 2.6.
To me, your best plan for 2025 is having Xander play shortstop another year. He can certainly handle it. Heck, he may end up playing another couple years there if you're looking at it as again, I'm not calling Xander a stopgap. He's obviously not with the contract, but I mean at shortstop.
Yes.
To me, this team is currently constructed. I think their best option is Xander at short, Cronenworth at second most days, Arise at first, mixed in with a guy who will also play first base, much like they had last year. Let Arise DH on some days, too. Look, they may have a situation where it's more of a consistent DH, too. Well, it depends who they add and who they sign. But I like that plan better than, especially for 2025, moving Xander off short again. And I also think from this perspective, too, the Xander part of it, I really would like to see Xander Bogaerts in a spot he's comfortable at shortstop, healthy, and hopefully seem healthy for a full year. Because to me, we have not seen that Xander yet. Look, has Xander been the guy start to finish in these seasons you thought he was going to be? No, he is not, and I think he knows that. But what we haven't seen, whether it was the wrist issue in 23 and obviously an injury in 2024 when he fractured his shoulder and was out for a long period of time, look, we haven't seen him play shortstop and be healthy start to finish. And I'd really like to see that. I'd really like it because I think Xander's a really good player, and I think he's better than what he's been so far here. I just do. I know there are a lot of fans that are frustrated with Xander. I get it. To me, I'm around this guy quite a bit. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a good leader. I think he's won. To me, we have not seen, fingers crossed, the best, nearly the best, or consistent of a Xander Bogaerts as I hope we'll see if he's healthy and in a position he's comfortable in. I'd like to see that. I'd like to give him that chance.
He came out like a house of fire this year and then slowed down, got hurt, and never really got it back. And the first year I attribute it to the same thing that I mentioned during the Scraby show, that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Packing up house, moving cross country, getting kids into schools, buying a new house, getting moved into that, getting cars registered, stuff like that weighs on your mind quite a bit that you don't see. And also moving from the American League to the National League, I don't expect when a big player moves like that, makes a big change, especially going from league to league, I don't expect to see them at their best in the first year.
Yeah.
And this year was an injury year for him.
Yeah, he got off to a slow start even before the injury, which, look, I thought he would get off to a better start. Year two, I did, and he didn't, unfortunately. And then the injury happened, which kind of derailed the season in a way.
He was pretty good the first couple weeks and then fell right away.
But yeah, like, again, we talk about that word consistency. I think one interesting element to this team in particular in 25, assuming the Padres aren't going to make big splashes, that doesn't mean they're not going to add. I think they're going to add, and they have to. But are you going to see them go out and spend money on a Willy Adames, on a Juan Soto? No. That's probably not going to happen, right? Any of the top tier guys.
Corbin Burns to that point.
Probably not going to happen. The one thing when you talk about consistency, continuity, it's like kind of interesting to think about, okay, this may be a year where there is no big shakeup necessarily to this roster. There is no addition of Xander. There is no addition of a Juan Soto, even though he had been there for a couple of months. There is no maybe like, big news of Xander moving. And I talk about it in Xander's sense, but also just a team-wide sense where, again, you come back to that word consistency. Like maybe it'll be kind of nice this year for it to be, hey, this is a really similar group and everybody's sort of in the similar roles at the end of the year as, yes, there are additions, new faces, of course. Look, if Jerks and Profar's not in that clubhouse, that's a big difference. There's no way around that. Okay, I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but it's different for sure. We're going to find out, but it may not be the worst thing in the world for it to just sort of be the same group-ish. And I think there's some value in that. Consistency, continuity, and so on.
Yeah, you don't need to take a big swing with this roster. You don't need to make a big fix. You just need to fill in a couple of pieces, which is why I think like a Carlos Santana coming in, he could switch first and DH with a rise would be very nice. And to get one of those big pitching guys that's out there, Snell, Fried, maybe Nathan Eovaldi possibly, that would be big. And then you kind of do what you did a couple of years ago. try to fill in the rest of that rotation and the depth with Waka
Yeah.
guys, Lugo guys, just to see what you get.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see. See what happens. Yeah, look, the bigger starting pitchers like a Snell. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And you look at some of the salary projections, the contract projections. It's interesting, and you kind of start thinking. I know ESPN sort of laid it out with some salary projections, and you can find this stuff in a lot of different places. Makes you start to wonder a little bit. Like, okay, maybe there is one big guy they could spend on and still have enough left. Yeah, we'll see. But they're in a good spot. All right, when we come back, let's do that Mike Schultz, AJ Preller audio earlier today. Take phone calls, 833-288-0973. Hour number 2, Inside San Diego Baseball, coming up next on 97.3 The Fan. Hour number 2 of Inside San Diego Baseball on this Wednesday evening here in America's finest city. Sam Levitt with you. Frank Marchese alongside on the board, doing a nice job getting all the audio up and ready to go. We'll hear from A.J. Preller, Mike Schultz, what they had to say earlier today in just a moment. Good stuff from them. Padres announcing a contract extension for Mike Schultz earlier today. 2 years, taking him through 2027. So Mike will be here in 2025 and then signed through 26 and 27. And it makes a lot of sense why it went through 27. Kind of had to, because if you only had to go through 26, then guess what? You get to the end of this 2025 season, you're in the exact same spot heading into the final year of a deal. So ends up being a multi-year contract extension for Mike Schultz. Congratulations to him. We'll hear from Mike and AJ what they had to say earlier today during the official press conference. We'll hear that in just a little bit. Dive into what they had to say, react to it, give you our thoughts on what went down. Again, it's our new Padres offseason hot stove program, Wednesday night, 7 to 9 p.m. here on 97.3 The Fan. They have got me out of the offseason malaise, the slumber, if you will. Still early, only early November, and brought me in for 2 hours on Wednesday nights to talk Padres baseball. And look, if you're sitting there in the first hour saying to yourself, hey, they're just sort of spitballing here, going through some different things, look. GM meetings going on. It's not like there's a ton of news and rumors Padres related right now. So we're in spitballing mode, right? Talking about, like, hey, is Xander Bogaerts going to be your shortstop? If he's not, what does that mean? When you're looking at catchers, how much are you considering Ethan Salas and the idea that he could be up in a season or two? Right? I mean, these are things that you think about as an organization. And obviously, the Padres, like we've said, starting in a very, very good spot. But work to be done. And the question around the CBT, how much they'll spend, how much they would go over, things like that. Yeah. If they go over, yeah. What that means if you do, what that means if you don't. These are the kind of things you're thinking about as the offseason gets rolling. All right, let's get a phone call in here, 833-288-0973. Loyal Padres radio listener. Good to hear from Kathy in L.A. here in the offseason. Kathy, you're on Inside San Diego Baseball. Hello, Kathy.
Hey, Sammy. Congratulations on the new show.
Oh,
I'm so excited to see that you were going to be on the offseason just to kind of keep us in line and keep us seeing what's going on with our favorite team.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I work at UCLA.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're also the official hospital for the Dodgers. So Monday at work, big celebration for the World Series. And, hey, get a free Dodger hat. And it's just like, I'll pass on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel you, Kathy. I feel you. I know. It probably was a tough few weeks. Tough few weeks for you up in L.A. That's okay. Maybe Padres will get him back in 25. We'll see. Kathy, appreciate you checking in. Great to hear from you. Hope you're doing well. Not missing baseball too much yet. But good to hear from you. Thank you for calling in and listening. I appreciate it.
Have a good night, Sammy.
All right, that's Kathy in L.A. Yes, Kathy, always surrounded by the Dodger fans. Yeah, it didn't end the way you wanted it. If you're a Padres fan, no doubt about that. I'll tell you what, that Yankee fifth inning in Game 5, I still think about that sometimes. What an absolute disaster of a fifth inning that was. And what could have been. What could have been. I really feel like if they wouldn't have totally unraveled on themselves, that could have been a really interesting series heading back to L.A. Frank, it was not to be.
They lost that series in the 10th inning of Game 1.
No, that's true.
It was over from there.
Yes, some extremely questionable decisions. I thought the Cortez decision to face Freeman in Game 1 was brutal. Quite frankly, even in Game 1, not letting Cole go deeper in that game, there was a lot to it.
And I still, it worked out for them, but not throwing Cole in Game 4 with your year on the line and going to Luis Gill, who'd thrown 4 innings all postseason. That was, again, it worked out for them, but that was about as dumb a decision as I could think of.
Yeah.
I know it's Cole on short rest, but tomorrow's not guaranteed like it would have been in Game 3.
Yeah.
You have to throw your ace in that game.
Yeah, if Cole covers first base, who knows?
That
I mean,
too.
yes. I mean, it really, it's amazing. I mean, if that 5th inning had just gone a little bit better, I mean, Judge dropping the fly ball, unbelievable.
As a Met fan, I was giggling half the time, but
I will say this, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think we said we do a little World Series reaction. We haven't really done it. Maybe we'll get to it if we have time towards the end. But I do think, if you're looking at a blueprint for what wins a World Series, look, the Dodgers, what do they have? Deep lineup, deep effective bullpen. Padres, I would say, had even better starting pitching, even though the Dodgers starting pitching in the World Series for the most part was really good.
Games.
Yeah, I mean, it made you confident that the Padres had the exact right recipe of the type of team.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the problem is it's the playoffs in a 5-game series, and you got to find ways to win. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much about the Dodger World Series. All right, let's get to some of this audio from Mike Shildt and AJ Preller earlier today, after Mike Shildt earlier in the day officially announced he is on a 2-year extension that'll take him through 2027 as Padres manager. 2025 on the original contract was slated to be the final year of the deal. So you sort of knew heading into the winter, obviously, that Mike was going to be back after winning 93 games. But you sort of knew that the Padres, and I'm sure Mike didn't want to be sitting there as a quote-unquote lame duck manager in the final year of his deal. And quite frankly, that doesn't seem very fair for what he did in 2024. So you knew they were going to get something done. And unsurprisingly, 2027, it'll go through now as contracts. So Mike Shildt now signed for not just next year, but the next 2 seasons as well. So we'll get to a bunch of different stuff here because this was at noon today. So this will probably spill into the next segment as well. We'll get to kind of all the different elements they discussed here. First, let's hear from Mike Shildt on first the end of the season, the way 2024 ended, obviously frustrating end to the Padres season, and everything moving forward after Mike Shildt signed this extension.
We got done with the season, and I know everybody in the organization was a little bit of, in a little bit of a rightful stupor about, how it ended. And then you look up and realize that, a lot of good things took place and started the process working towards next year, as AJ mentioned. And, AJ and ownership came to me about making sure that I felt valued and appreciated, and we were going to do this together moving forward for a longer period of time that was secured. And, obviously I was very, very happy about that. Relative to your question about what that vision looks like, I'm sure AJ can chime in as well. But, it's we're going to start meetings, tomorrow with our pitching group, Thursday, Friday with our big league staff and player development and AAA group to talk about what we just got through experiencing, what we want to capture from it, and then how we're going to move it forward individually and collectively with our pitching. We'll do our defense and base running. Infield, outfield, base running, and catching over that Saturday and Sunday. And then we'll do our hitting group on Monday and Tuesday. So the vision is really just a continual process of what we've been able to do and some of the process that we've been able to put in place. The one thing that I was able to share with the staff right after the last game we played, and I said, the good news is we covered a lot of ground, and we've got a lot of process that we feel good about. We partner with our players, most importantly, that they're a part of the process and how we operate and how we compete and how we win. But the really good news is that we're just getting started. Those processes still have a lot more depth to them. There's a lot more tentacles for them. So, and again, the last wrap-up point is the partnership with the players. I've been able to have lunch or dinner with a lot of the players who are still in town. Like I said, this group's still hungry, but also the players and the staff, we all recognize together that there's a lot more meat on the bone, and we're about to go chewing on it.
So that was Mike Shildt earlier today. You heard a lot there from Mike, and we'll hear more in a second here. But it brings me back to what I said in the opening segment, and we've said now through the first 70 minutes or so of the program. And that is, again, I think there's value in consistency. There's value in continuity. And it's not just your roster. It's not just your players, but it's your processes. It's your coaching staff. And to me, that's something the Padres have lacked: consistency, coaching-wise, philosophy-wise. And there was so much good to take away from 2024. If you want to even just look at the offensive standpoint, what they were, how they played, how they hit, their philosophy, we lauded them for it all year. Again, that consistency, that continuity, the way they played in the second half, those are all things that are really, really promising, that hopefully bode well for 2024 from the very start of the year. I'd love for this team in 2025 to get off to a good start, right? I mean, think about it this way. This team in 2023 did not get off to a good start. In 2024, they didn't get off to a good start, hovering around 500 until the All-Star break. Wouldn't it be nice, kind of like 22, which obviously they didn't play nearly as well in sort of the middle stretch of the season? Wouldn't it be nice to sort of take some momentum one season to the next? Consistency, continuity, feel like there's a continuity from last year, from the very first pitch, very first few games of the year, see the same type of team we saw in the second half of 2024 that hits, that moves the line, that comes back, that has heart. Be pretty nice to see. Here was a good question, good couple of questions, I think, from AJ Cassavell earlier today. Again, this is from the Mike Schilt and AJ Preller press conference earlier today. Questions from MLB.com, Padres beat reporter AJ Cassavell.
You talked a lot about the continuity on the staff and then the core of players that you have in place, but there are a couple free agents. I'm just wondering kind of I know it's not your purview necessarily, but your outlook on guys like Profar and Kim, who obviously meant a lot, and Higashioka, that meant a lot to the team last season, and whether you would like them back in San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I defer to AJ on that. I mean, there's a business side to it. There's a lot of pieces and that, are part of that puzzle. I mean, I loved all three of those guys. I mean, they did a phenomenal job for us. Very grateful for them. They're one of the reasons that I'm getting this extension. So I'm thankful to them, as like I said, to all the players, but I'll defer to AJ on any of the, particulars on that.
So then my next question for AJ, obviously, Profar and Kim were not extended qualifying offers. Can you kind of go into that decision-making process and then just kind of your outlook on their off seasons and whether you'd like to bring them back?
Yeah, no, they're, Profar and Kim, they've been a big part of this thing. Jerkson at different points in time in the last few years, and obviously he had the great year this year. So, he's somebody we're definitely interested in talking to, and he's a real part of what we're doing. And I've already extended out and just started those conversations. But again, he's somebody that he's earned the right to be a free agent. So we'll kind of see where that takes us. Same thing with Ha-Sung. I think Ha-Sung, and I think, from his standpoint, the injury, as well, that, he'll come back from that, but that's all part of the calculus. And, kind of that's what this week is for here in at the GM meetings. We've been preparing for this, and this is kind of the start of the off season. So, ultimately decided not to put the qualifying offer. That's a $20+ million number on a 1-year deal. Just feel like, that wasn't quite the direction we wanted to go to on a 1-year situation. But it doesn't close the door on either player. I think, now we get into the free agent period, and we're spending the week trying to see what our options are, what things look like, getting a lot of information, from a roster standpoint. And Jerkson and Ha-Sung are going to be two guys that are going to be part of our conversations all off season.
That was AJ Preller earlier today during that Mike Schultz contract extension press conference. Obviously, the reporters using it as an opportunity to ask AJ about other things as well, including the Padres, like you heard alluded to. They're not giving qualifying offers to Ha-Sung, Kim, and Jerkson Profar, which was not surprising at all, because those are guys that you're just not going to bring back at a $20+ million a year number, especially in the case of Kim, who's in all likelihood going to miss at least a couple of months at the very start of the season. Look, we haven't really talked about Profar a ton here, and we've got plenty of time to do it in the weeks ahead. Look, that's a It's a very interesting case for the Padres, and I think for Jurickson as well. I think it begins for me with what is the market for Jurickson Profar, who's coming off a career year, who clearly loves being in San Diego, who has been the best version of himself in San Diego. What is the market for Jurickson? Is there a team out there that's going to give him a 3-4 year deal for significant money? Could Jurickson Profar have an AAV of $15 million a year, let's say? Could he get a 3-year, $40-something million deal, or even more than that? Did he certainly earned the right to maybe get it, but I think the Jurickson conversation is really, really, really fascinating because I think it all begins with what is the market? And is there a team that looks at this past year and says to themselves, we believe Jurickson's going to be close to that for the next few years? Because Jurickson's got one season like that. He's had solid seasons before, but a season, for the most part, even though he cooled off as it came down the stretch, he's had one of those, and it was last year, and it was awesome. And he was a huge, huge part of this group. And he's very important to this group. But to me, that's where it starts with Profar. What is the market? And if there is a team out there willing to give him, let's say, a 4-year deal for, let's say, I'm just throwing out a number, 4 years, $50 million. I mean, that's still less than $15 million, whatever the number is, $15 million AAV. It's less than that. Like, is there a team that watched 2024 and believes Jurickson is that type of player? And there might be in the Padres, again, when you talk about budget constraints and what they need. That's going to be a very interesting question. What is the value of Profar on the market, and what is the value of Jurickson Profar to the Padres, and how do those two things mesh?
I think a 4-year deal might be a little
I would
bit
think so.
much.
I wouldn't be handing it out.
It's going into his age 33 season. I mean, you can get a similar kind of player. They both had the same WAR with Mark Canha. Canha's 4 years older, and he would be certainly cheaper than Profar would be right now. If you go after like a Blake Snell and really spend the money, that's one of the places where you're going to try to have to save a little bit of cash.
Yeah,
is finding that left fielder, and to get similar value between Profar and Mark Canha, and be cheaper. That's not a bad trade-off.
I think, again, I think the question is there going to be a team out there that's going to give Jurickson, fine, let's not even say 4, let's say 3 years for something significant. I mean, even like 3 years for 30. 3 years, if you're the Padres or I'll bring it down even from, because I'm probably a little too ambitious on what that number is. Again, with what you need and depending on your belief in Jurickson Profar, it's going to be a key question and an important question. And I don't quite know what the market is for Jurickson. I don't. So we'll see. All right, let's take a break. We'll get to more of what A.J. Preller, Mike Schultz had to say earlier today on the other side of this break. We continue on Inside San Diego Baseball, our new Wednesday night program here on 97.3 The Fan, talking all things Padres, offseason, hot stove, you name it. We're back in a moment on 97.3 The Fan. Inside San Diego Baseball continues on this Wednesday night. Sam Levitt with you, 823 on 97.3 The Fan. Frank Marchese also alongside me as we bring you up until 9 p.m. on this Wednesday night. Wow, long day of local programming starting at 6 a.m. with Ben and Woods, 9 p.m. with me and Frank and I should say. Long day of programming. First edition of Inside San Diego Baseball as we come to you every Wednesday night. Our off-season program, little Sammy Lev for you from 7 to 9 on Wednesday nights. We'll get to your phone calls here in a second, 833-288-0973. The phone number, 833-288-0973. We do have two local games. Hey, we're not just going to talk about baseball. We really will. But, hey, when we have score updates, we'll give them to you. Two local college basketball games to update you on. We have one very early still, 10:25 remaining in the first half. Ryder leading USD at USD right now, 19-15. They are about midway through the first half. So Ryder a lead at USD, 19-15 season opener for the Toreros. Got a good game at Viejas Arena. UC San Diego beating San Diego State right now, 41-40, 11:24 remaining at Viejas right now. So don't turn away from Inside San Diego Baseball. But just two score updates for you. Again, USD trailing early against Ryder, and a good game. UC San Diego leading San Diego State 41-40. At San Diego State right now. So we'll see if UC San Diego can pull off the crosstown upset at San Diego State. All right, couple of phone calls to get to. Let's go to Alex in Carlsbad. Alex, from what I understand, wants to revisit our conversation from the last segment about Jurickson Profar. Alex, good to hear from you. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. This Profar, I'm a little... I don't like him anymore. When he,
ouch,
he was. I kind of missed the segment. I got my car. I didn't hear exactly what you said, but he was the number one prospect at one time. 5-tool guy. He never really got it done. Put it together with the Rangers. He went to the A's, and he could have been out of baseball if not for Melvin and Preller, who worked with him before. They were onto the pods. He did great. He did well. He got the contract, and we make the playoffs. And then what does he do? He opts out and leaves right after we make the playoffs. I mean, that is not. It seems like the fans are showing more loyalty to him than than he does to us.
Yeah, look.
And now it's like. Well, I also want to say. He goes to Rockies, doesn't work out, he comes back, and that was just embarrassing in the playoffs, in my opinion. I mean, that's just bad for the show. He's holding up the entire country with his ball. He's not showing whether he caught it or not, and I think he's really on the bad side of MLB in general. And although here in San Diego, we're like, yeah, maybe he's going to play here, maybe there, maybe $20 million, blah, blah, but I think in baseball – just the way my ears to the ground, I think he's fallen very much out of favor, and I'd say 2 years, $20 million at the most, and I think he really needs to work on his next organization. If he doesn't want to live the right way on and off the field and be a mature player, he's going to be done, because there's plenty of people who want to be pros.
All right, Alex, appreciate the phone call. I don't know that so the one part of the call that I do agree with is like 2 years, $20 million, right? Interesting number. See, that's an interesting scenario for Jurickson Profar. Okay. If there's a team out there that wants to give him 2 for $20 and he comes to the Padres and says, hey, you can match this, I'm coming back to San Diego. It's an interesting offer. I think that's in all likelihood what it's probably going to be around. And I don't know that $10 million a year, it's a huge pay increase from a year ago, but I don't know that that's unfair for Jurickson after what he did last year. I will say this, Alex, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't totally understand the rest of what you were saying there. I mean, look, I know Jurickson had fun with the fans in LA and didn't show him the ball. To me, Jurickson, I think he's a really well-respected guy around baseball and really well-liked. And I know he antagonizes sometimes other fan bases, just by the passion he plays with. And look, we saw him get into dust-ups, whether it was the Mr. Irrelevant comments or it was with the Nats. Yes, he is a guy who likes to play that role, and I think that's okay and can be a really good thing. But I actually think he's somebody, A, around baseball who has a lot of respect, and B, I think with the Padres and here in San Diego, I'll be honest with you, Alex, I've not run into many Padres fans that don't sort of love Jurickson Profar. That has no bearing on whether he's going to be back or not, but that was interesting because I feel like most people do not feel the way Alex feels at all.
No, and I don't understand where, and this is old man yelling at clouds bit coming, but I don't understand where we got this notion that professional athletes aren't allowed to have a personality. Like, let him do what he's gonna do. See, you don't mind
right.
Tatis antagonizing Dodger fans.
And Jurickson appears, at least last year, to be at his best when he is playing that role.
Yeah.
When he's playing the thorn in the side.
The Bryce Harper role.
Yeah.
I mean, love him when he's on your team, but you hate him any other time.
Yeah, I think Jurickson, from a personality and what he means to this clubhouse standpoint, I think that's like actually a really, really big part of the value in what Jurickson brings. I think when you are considering bringing Jurickson back to be your everyday left fielder, I think you're asking two questions from a Padres standpoint. Really three. Number one, do you believe that 2024 is a sign of what he can be the next few years? That's question one. Question two, if you do believe that or you don't believe that, what is his value to you? What are you willing to give him years and money-wise? And that, again, comes back to the initial point of what is his market. And number three, what is his value as a member of this particular team in this particular clubhouse? And are there things about Pro? Are there intangibles? And there are, for sure. But what is the value of those things to the San Diego Padres in this particular clubhouse with these particular players? And that can be worth something. Can't be everything, but it can be worth something.
It's not completely unheard of for a guy to be a late bloomer. For guys who have those great potentials early, that when they get older, when they get like Pro in his early 30s, something just switches and they figure it out. He did it all year last year until it mattered most in September and then October. Maybe last year was his light switch year. Who knows? He's playing in a place where he feels comfortable. He enjoys playing here. The team obviously enjoys having him here and embrace having him here. And you need those bleep disturber kind of guys to not just get some life, but to rally the team and go, hey, he's fighting. We got to pick it up now.
Yeah, look, he means a lot. He does. He means a lot. He's a big part of the clubhouse. There's no doubt about it. And there's value to that. I just, the Jurickson question is going to be really interesting because I think it may get to a point where if there's a team out there that is willing to really extend themselves money-wise for him, it may be too rich for the Padres and what they need and maybe how they value Jurickson. And that's okay. Look, if Jurickson goes out and gets a nice 2-3 year deal upwards of 20-30 something million dollars and the Padres ultimately decide they don't want to match it, I'm not going to get on here and crush the Padres for it. I'm not because I think, to your point, like you brought up a name like a Mark Cannon, and I have to take a deeper look at the outfield names. But look, there are going to be other options, and look, you will miss Jurickson. But I'll get it. I'll understand it based on what they need and whether they go over the CBT or not. Some of the limited funds they may have to spend. All right, let's go to David in Santee. David, you're on Inside San Diego Baseball. Welcome in on this Wednesday night. How's it going?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, going well. I had just a couple thoughts on Profar here. First off, if you look up his Baseball Savant page, it's dark red all over the place.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yep.
I know you guys know. But, the advanced statistics show he's hit the ball about 5 miles an hour harder in 24 than in 23. he's looking really good. I understand he wasn't great in the playoffs, neither were a lot of the guys in, at the last couple games. Second thing, though, I would challenge the idea of Mark Canha. I'm looking at, Baseball Reference, Fangraphs. There's a massive difference between Profar and Canha. It's not even close in the value. Same with the advanced stats. And sorry, not trying to pick on that. Just I heard Canha thrown off. I'm like, there's no way they have the same WAR. It's not even close. So I would have you guys double check that. But I think my last thought is I don't know that there's a great internal replacement for Profar.
No, there's not.
And I don't know that on the market, there's not a whole lot more out there, honestly.
Yep.
So
Fair.
I'm a fan of Profar, and I'd love to keep him if, maybe a 3-year deal.
Yeah, fair. Go ahead, Frank.
Just two things on Canha. The reason why I threw him out there is because at least MLB.com says they have the same WAR, 2.7. I'm going off of what MLB.com has on their free agency list.
I don't know. Maybe it's projection. I got him at 0.6 on Baseball Reference for this past year. I don't know. Whatever. Look, regardless of WAR, I understand the point you're making is, look, he's a veteran outfield type, whether he's going to be Profar or not.
The reason why I brought up Mark Canha was if you're willing to break the bank on a guy like Snell or Max Fried, you may not have the capital to get Profar back, and Canha would be a cheaper veteran option. That was why I brought up Canha.
Yeah, I think again, without getting deeper into the corner outfield, left field type list of prospects, and we'll have time to do it on future shows. Yeah, like you will have to, again, when we talk about the Profar scenario, again, you talk about factors, weighing, okay, well, if you don't sign Profar, who is your starting left fielder? Because you don't have one. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, you could put David Peralta back out there, but I don't think you're going to have him play every day out there, and I don't think that can be the plan. So, and by the way, he's a free agent. So, yeah, that's another part of the equation. What are your other options? Let's go to Mike in Carlsbad. Mike, you're on Inside San Diego Baseball on this Wednesday night. Welcome in.
Hey, my two favorite New Yorkers. Can I get off topic here and ask the resident Met fan a question?
Yeah, go. This is for Frank. Go ahead.
Okay.
Frankie, do we sign Jesse Winker again?
Oh, as a Profar type, as a pain in the neck, I probably would, honestly. As a glue guy, I probably would. He's not going to cost much, but I think Winker should come back.
And a clubhouse guy. How about one more? How about the polar bear? What are we going to do?
Boy, we're turning this to FAN, aren't we? He's one that would hurt after just losing DeGrom. To lose Alonso is going to hurt, but unless
not if we get Soto though.
Oh, no. It'll deaden the blow a little bit, but I think he really needs to work on his average if you bring him back. He can't just be a solo power hitter as an everyday first baseman.
All right, Mike. Appreciate the phone call. I got to...
I appreciate it. Trust me, I appreciate it. But
I made a mistake letting two questions go by.
Wrong FAN.
You know what? Hey, Padres could maybe use a power hitting first baseman. Never know.
Only the city liked him.
All right, let's stay after that Met detour. Let's step aside. We'll come back. We'll wrap up with a couple more phone calls. If you're on hold, wait on hold a little bit longer. And so we'll also get back to that audio from Mike Schultz, AJ Preller, wrap that up as well. Let you hear what you might have missed earlier today as the Padres announce a contract extension for Mike Schultz, taking him through the 2027 Padres season. So we'll wrap up with that. Some of your phone calls as well at 833-288-0973. This is 97.3 The Fan. Inside San Diego Baseball, our final segment. We've got about, what would you say, 15 minutes or so left in the program, taking you up until 9 p.m., just shortly before 9 p.m. as we continue to talk Padres baseball. We've talked about a lot of jerks and Profar in this hour. We've talked about Mike Shildt, the contract extension. We will wrap up here tonight with a couple of other sound bites from the press conference earlier today with the Padres announcing an contract extension for their skipper, Mike Shildt, bringing Mike through the 2027 Padres season. So that was very good to hear earlier today. Like we said, you heard from A.J. Preller earlier, and you know what? We're actually going to play that audio coming up, Preller on the rest of the coaching staff. But you heard what we had to say from Kevin Acey's article that came out a little bit earlier in the evening, really alluding to the fact that Victor Rodriguez apparently has had an extension to his contract. And, well, I want to make sure I say that right again. Let me pull it up again, just so I get it right here. I read it earlier. I want to make sure I get the reporting right. Hitting coach Victor Rodriguez, who is under contract through 2025, expected to have at least one more year added to his deal. And Ruben Niebla, who has overseen one of MLB's most consistent staffs the past 3 seasons, will take part in meetings regarding the pitching group the next 2 days, even though his new contract has not yet been agreed to. So all signs pointing to Ruben being back in a Padres uniform on the coaching staff in 2025 and presumably beyond. So we'll hear from AJ and Mike Shildt a little bit more before we go. Let's squeeze in a couple of final phone calls in this hour and on the program here tonight. Let's quickly go across the pond. It's our friend Welsh Fryer, Tom in Wales. Welsh Fryer, what's going on? What time is it there?
It's very late. I'd rather not say. It's just coming up to 5 in the morning.
Oh, very early, really? Wow, 5 a.m. What are you doing up? You got to go to sleep, man.
I'm just waking up. I got college to go to.
There you go.
To do, so.
All right, there you go. I love it. What's going on? Welcome in.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm so excited for this up and coming season. I think the one thing at the moment AJ Preller needs to do is just lock down this coaching staff. I believe that in these last couple of years, we've really struggled due to our coaching staff. We haven't had it all locked down, but Ruben Niebla, Mike Shildt, Victor Rodriguez, I think they're the core 3 that we need at the moment. And then we go on to the players. Obviously, there's spots to fill in. The one thing I also don't want us to do is go for one of these big $300 million 10-year contracts. We know how risky they are.
Yeah.
They don't always pay off. I'd rather us just fill in the gaps. Kyle Higashioka, Jurickson Profar, maybe a couple of other bullpen pieces. But yeah, I think we just got to trust in Preller now to see what he can do and put us into this 2025 season nicely.
Yeah, I'm with you on both fronts, Welsh Fryer, and appreciate the phone call as always. Thank you for tuning in. Really, thank you for tuning in. 5 a.m. Across the world, really, over in Wales. I agree with you on both points, Tom. Number one, yeah, we talked about it earlier. Consistency, continuity. It's something they have not had a ton of in San Diego the last decade or so. Yeah, having consistency, continuity on your coaching staff when they did as nice of a job collectively as they did last year, I think is really significant. I think it's good. I think it's really good. I think it's exactly what you want. That's GM included, right? You talk about not just consistency, continuity, but alignment. We've heard that word used a lot when it comes to A.J. Preller. Alignment with Mike Shildt, alignment with the rest of the organization. You want alignment, and it was pretty clear they were very aligned last year. It was very, very clear, and they talked about it earlier today. So it's important. And look, I don't think they're in a spot where you're going to see any $300 million contract given out. Look, Tom, for all we know, this may end up being very simple for the Padres in a couple of spots. Would I be shocked if Higgy's back? No, not at all. Would I be shocked if Profar's back? No, not at all. This could end up being... Really, it could end up being a very, very, very similar, if not like almost identical lineup to what it was a year ago. Neither of those things would surprise me. And look, we said it earlier, whether it's Higgy, whether it's Profar, whether it's whatever they do starting pitching-wise, any move AJ makes, forgetting the CBT number, whether they go over or whether they're staying under, AJ's got to have a good offseason. It's got to be a similar type job where he's going to have to hit on a lot of moves. Like if you bring Jerks and Profar back on whatever deal that is, well, you need him to be productive. You need him to be somewhat, at least, like the player he was in 2024. You need Kyle Higashioka to be the player he was in 2024, whether it's Solano and Peralta on your bench or other guys that kind of fit that mold. Whoever it is, AJ's going to have to hit because there's just not a ton of wiggle room with some of the budget constraints to miss. There's just not. So, they've given out the big contracts. They have the stars here. Your core is here. They're in a great starting spot. But, yeah, you have to hit on the pieces around it. And we saw last year a really good example of when you hit with this particular group, when you can hit on those pieces, man, this team could be really good. Could get off to a really good start and be really good. You got to hit again. And I think AJ can. You hope he does because last year he hit a lot. He did. He had a magic touch, and he's going to have that sort of touch again, I think, in 2025. All right, we've teased more of the AJ Preller, Mike Shildt audio. I do want to get some of that to you. I know we said we would do player reviews. We'll save some of this for next week. We'll probably not have a ton of news and rumors even next week in mid-November, so we've got plenty of time.
Next week, we got like 4 months of this.
Yeah,
right? Come on,
well,
we can
it'll
spread
heat
stuff out.
It'll heat up. Well, it'll heat up Major League Baseball wide, I'm sure. So it'll heat up. All right, let's end with a couple of sound bites here from the press conference with AJ and Mike Shildt. Here was AJ Preller again. We talked about the reporting from Kevin Acee earlier today, but here was AJ Preller earlier today, the status of the Padres coaching staff.
And since the end of the season, it's really like parallel paths for our baseball ops group. When one path is obviously getting Mike done, and then Mike and myself. It's almost been every day, honestly, just sitting down, and it's a review mainly of our staff. And I've been around managers that don't really want to be a part of that at times. Like to me, I think it's super healthy when you have general manager sit down and just like honestly can walk through, hey, like at the end of the day, the things that our staff brought to the table. I think both of us over the course of a couple of days, we were pretty, it was pretty easy to be on the same page in terms of bringing this group back, understanding here's the areas that we can grow in, and now being in the process of getting that group under contract. So I think from our standpoint, we'll have more to say over the course of the next few days and, the next week or so. But again, from Mike and my standpoint, we think we have a super talented group. And we've been having different conversations with everybody in that staff, and I think it's really about bringing that group back and building on the success from this year and having that continuity. That was important to Mike from day one of myself, and that's really what the last couple of weeks have been about. And we'll be able to announce that when we get the full staff under contract the next week or so.
At the moment, do you expect all of them to be back? And can you speak specifically to Ruben Niebla and where you are with him since his contract expired?
Yeah, no, I know, from Ruben's standpoint, again, he's done a great job with the pitching staff. He's been here 3 years now. Again, a lot of common ground from our organization, Mike, myself, Ruben. And again, I think it's clear he wants to be here. He knows we want him to be here. And, again, when we announce the staff, I think you'll see like we're going to reward the people that have performed. Ruben's been a big performer, and we're looking forward for him being a big part of the Padre organization for a long time.
So that was AJ Preller. Some questions there on the coaching staff and also on Ruben Niebla. Like we said, the reporting from Kevin Acee earlier today sounds like that deal is getting pretty close to done. So it doesn't sound like any major concern that Ruben will not be on the Padres staff in 2025 and presumably well beyond that. Let's finish up here. A medley of questions from, speaking of Kevin Acee, of the San Diego Union Tribune.
What has you optimistic? Because you are generally optimistic, but what are the top tenets of why you're optimistic? You mentioned right after the NLDS about expecting the playoffs these next few years, and now that you're going to be the manager, it looks like. What has you so optimistic?
I'm optimistic that we have an organization that, is starting at the top with ownership, AJ. We've got a lot of confidence in that group. I don't think about our roster. I didn't think about it last year. And getting to know AJ, I mean, he allows me to chime in and share, my thoughts, and our staff gets to share their thoughts. But I'm confident that he'll continue to do a great job of giving us the resources we need to compete. So it really starts there, and then kind of what I've just got through speaking about. I'm really tickled about the staff. AJ will talk about our staff. I'm sure it'll come up at some point, but I'm looking forward to the staff staying together, being together, growing together, taking the next steps. So that continuity between the staff and the players on the field, we've established a good base for that. We're only going to deepen it. And, based on, the commitment I feel like we're going to get from the ownership and the job that AJ will do. And then coupled with, what we're doing on the field with our players and our staff, it's only going to improve and allow that continuity to allow us to take the next steps.
How important was this to you, to not go into next year and just have it be 1 year? And also, if you could just speak to, you came in talking about alignment. If you could just elaborate on your relationship with AJ.
Yeah, I'll start there. I mean, I alluded to it. Our relationship for me is as important as any other relationship, or at least at the top of the food chain in this organization's success. And we do it. We talk daily. We spend a lot of time. We both have a shared passion for this game and a strong desire for competitive greatness. And that's what fuels our relationship. And we're able to have just honest dialogues that, we don't agree. And sometimes it takes us a day or two to get to a mutual disagreement. But for the most part, a high percentage that we end up being completely aligned on, and we respect each other enough to move on and support the other person's vision for what this needs to look like. And that give and take is really, really important. So, that alignment starts with there, but then it goes down to the togetherness of the staff and the players. Without togetherness with the group, I know that a big part of our success on the field this year, which the players deserve the credit for, is the ability for our leadership of our team. I hesitate to mention all the players because I don't want to leave anybody out, but clearly you've got the core group of Manny and Toddy and Bogey and Crony and Joe and you, this group that's been signed for a long term, that group's bought into it. And then you add the Rises to the mix and the Michael Kings to the mix, and the guys that are adding on that are going to take that next piece of the mantle. Obviously Jackson being a big part of that, and him doing his part this year, and being a bigger part and what that looks like moving forward. So that vertical alignment that everybody's working together is really the key to this thing.
All right, that was Mike Schultz earlier today during the press conference after the Padres announced his contract extension, taking him through 2027 as the Padres manager as we wind things down here on Inside San Diego Baseball on this Wednesday night. All right, before we go, a couple of quick headlines for you from around Major League Baseball. Garrett Cole first opted out of his contract with the Yankees, then rescinded his opt-out. He'll get at least 4 years, $144 million remaining on this current deal. Sounds like the Yankees and Cole will continue talking about maybe even extending that deal. Angels, if you missed it earlier today, they agreed to a contract with Kyle Hendricks, 1 year, $2.5 million deal with the Angels for the longtime Chicago Cub, Kyle Hendricks. Scott Boras earlier today at the GM meeting said Juan Soto will go through a thorough vetting process before making a decision on a team. I would hope so, Juan, with the money involved in that.
Why is Scott Boras the only agent we hear from? Why?
Well, he likes to talk, and he likes his puns.
Good for him. I like to talk. I don't get a platform every single day.
Well, he talks a couple of times in that setting a year.
Sick and I'm sick and tired of hearing about how everyone's got to bend to Scott Boras.
I like when he talks. He's funny. What else we got? veteran catcher Austin Hedges, a 1-year deal to return to the Guardians for $4 million. And finally, Alex Bregman had surgery to remove a bone chip in his right elbow. Bregman, that's significant because he is a free agent, pretty good free agent at that. Third baseman, longtime Astro, one of the guys the Astros did not decide to really extend for a long time. He did sign a 5-year deal, $100 million in 2019, but that deal is now over. Bregman now a free agent. So some quick hitters, quick headlines for you around Major League Baseball last 24, 48 hours or so. And that will do it for the first ever edition of Inside San Diego Baseball. We will talk to you next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Ben and Woods on tomorrow, 6 a.m. Talk to you then on 97.3 The Fan.